From Trump's perspective, moving the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is giving Israel Jerusalem. And how dare we be so ungrateful as to say no when he wants us to do a two-state deal? I think Donald Trump came back into office determined to deal with Netanyahu differently this time around. Ready for Netanyahu, ready for all his tricks. Before even being inaugurated, Trump forced a hostage deal on us that Netanyahu resisted in July. He resisted it very successfully when Biden tried to impose it over the summer. But Trump and his emissary, Steve Witkoff, basically twisted Netanyahu's arm and forced him to accept this. And now we're releasing almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. We're withdrawing our forces from Netzarim and Philadelphia. We're getting some hostages back, and that's good. Obviously, it feels good to see those hostages reunited with their families. We want the hostages back. But there's a very important hostage that Hamas is holding that we need to also get back, and that is Gaza, which is part of our homeland. That's a hostage we can't forget about. And we can't let Trump force us into policies that are not good for us, that Netanyahu knows are not good for us. And this might just be the beginning. I think this is a very foreboding sign, a very ominous sign of what's to come. We have 4 years of Trump planning to strong-arm Netanyahu into doing what he wants. And I think what Trump wants is to show that he can do what no other president before him could do. And that's solve the conflict. A Saudi peace deal that involves a two-state solution. And I'm concerned that Trump is going to work very hard to put a lot of pressure on our prime minister and not let him sidestep, not let Netanyahu maneuver in the way he's been outmaneuvering US presidents until now, in order to force a policy that's bad for us, in order to take parts of our land away from us, in order to make us weaker and more dependent on the United States. Netanyahu knows the Americans are the greatest threat, and that the way to outmaneuver them is very complicated. And it's not, with Biden and maybe with Harris, he's able to resist directly, stand up and look like a big hero standing up to the Americans. With Trump, he can't do that. Trump is a strong leader. Trump is unpredictable. Trump might be a little bit crazy, right? He might be a little mentally ill, right? And there's no telling what he's going to do. If you say no to him, if you embarrass him, if you humiliate him, right? Israel's going to stand up to Donald Trump. And he's coming in not only with an axe to grind against Netanyahu for everything that happened last time, but also with a feeling that Israel owes him. In Trump's own mind, he gave us Jerusalem. He gave us the Golan Heights. This is the way he speaks. From Trump's perspective, moving the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is giving Israel Jerusalem. And how dare we be so ungrateful as to say no when he wants us to do a two-state deal? How dare we? That's Trump's perception. I'm very concerned about the next 4 years. But what's good is that Trump already showed his hand. He already bullied Netanyahu into something that at least the Israeli national camp knows is bad for us. And if we're willing to look at the reality, if we're willing to accept what the people in this country who support the deal take for granted, by the way, every Israeli who supports this ceasefire hostage deal says explicitly, Trump forced Netanyahu. There's no question. Trump himself says it explicitly. It's obvious to anybody who can see. It's only the people in the national camp, it's only the Jews who are so emotionally and psychologically invested in Trump And the idea that we can have a friend, an ally, a sympathetic ear in the White House that will let us do all the things we want to do. It's only those Jews who have trouble accepting the fact that Trump forced this on Netanyahu. Donald Trump is not good for us. That it's actually a problem for the state of Israel. It's a problem for the people of Israel that Donald Trump was elected president. And that we are looking at what might be a very difficult 4 years. Much more difficult than had Kamala Harris won. In the last year and a half, since this war began, Prime Minister Netanyahu basically defied the Biden administration at almost every point. There was a moment, or months, where he delayed going into Rafah because of pressure from Washington. That's true. At certain moments, Netanyahu gave in to pressure from Biden and Blinken. But for the most part, when you look at the last 15 months of war, holistically, you see several examples of Netanyahu directly defying Biden, doing what he believed to be good for Israel, despite the fact that Biden had instructed him to do something different, despite the fact that he was instructed not to do or to do something else. Right? This is something that has essentially been the pattern of the war. And it actually led to Israel becoming a regional power, the regional power, maybe rivaled with Turkey, right? Had Kamala Harris been elected president, it's likely that that pattern would have continued, that we would have had a weak American president who is overtly hostile to Israel, certainly to the aspirations or the perception of Israel's interests in the national camp. And Netanyahu would have been able to keep defying her, keep standing up to an American president on behalf of Israel's interests. And it might have caused us to emerge as much stronger. I mean, already, as a result of this war, we've begun developing our own bombs, things that in the past we felt we needed from the Americans. I think that it's very clear to most Israeli policymakers today, certainly this government, that even if Donald Trump is somebody we can think of as a friend, then certainly the trajectory of American politics is not good for us. And that it's in our interest to get as free as we can, economically, diplomatically, militarily, to separate from the US empire. The part that I think most people in the national camp are missing is that Trump is not an exception. That Trump isn't different. And I think that's a very scary idea for a lot of Jews. Because if Trump isn't different, then that means there's no US president that could be good for us. The problem isn't that the wrong US president is elected. The problem isn't that it's a Democrat and not a Republican sometimes. The problem is that there is a core contradiction between US interests in West Asia and Israeli interests, or Jewish national interests. That there is a core conflict, an antagonistic contradiction. And no matter who is president of the United States, they will have no choice but to work against our interests.